process as we go through that process to get there. Similarly, business cases are not focused solely on a single course of action. We're looking to understand the realm of possible alternatives that we have and to pick from those based on the criteria that we establish that determine what's important to us. There's also a tendency to look at business cases as cost-benefit analysis only. Cost and benefit are absolutely important and a critical part of a business case, but we're not just looking at doing a traditional cost-benefit analysis, especially in the public sector, where cost-benefit is not always the best fit because we don't focus solely on return on investment. So business cases, they're persuasive through analysis. They're a documentation of a process, not just a research paper, and not just retroactively supporting a decision that we've already made. So we want to be documenting and going through a process to make that decision and understanding a business case from that perspective. Other things that are not a business case. So oftentimes I've seen things like policy position statements, sales pitches, opinion pieces, pilots. All of those things can help inform the information used in a business case, but are not in and of themselves business cases. Usually those are missing that kind of analytical element to them, or they are taking a course of action and trying to see what the outcome of that action is. It's less about the consideration of all of the alternatives and more about making a strong statement about a path forward that may not be as dependent on that analysis work that we expect to see in a business case. Elements of formal business cases, usually written business cases. So I always recommend Vicki James's Leveraging Business Analysis for Project Success. It's a classic at this point because it's almost 10 years old, if you can believe it. But there are elements of a formal business case that we expect to see in a written business case. This does not mean that all business cases must be written, but most formal business cases do result in a written product as part of the outcome of the process. For all of these, you need the business need or rationale, really the problem that you're trying to solve. And then the bread and butter of a business case is the alternatives considered section, where you talk about the different alternatives and the different ways that you are looking at measuring those alternatives against each other to come up with your recommendation. This is, again, where we get into that need to understand all of the different components of an analysis model and not just pick a solution and move forward to justify that solution as you would in a policy paper or a white paper. Another part of the business case that's important and that's really emphasized in project work is the implementation approach and evaluation measures that go along with that recommendation. So as we'll see in a couple slides, there is a definition from PMI about what a business case is, and it's really about structuring the business case to support the inevitable project activities and the project charter that comes out of it. And then this is, again, a reason that a business case is not just supporting one particular course of action. You expect to see the same analysis for each alternative to really understand apples to apples what the best solution for the problem or opportunity you're trying to take advantage of is based on what you've determined is important in your model. The written business case is just the tip of the iceberg. Again, this is about a process to arrive at a decision methodologically through analysis. So there's a whole bunch of process that happens under the water. The business case, the formal written business case is the thing that you see at the top as a result of all of that formation of the iceberg underneath, if you will.
And Rebecca, there's a comment in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to look at that and address.
Absolutely. Yes, so legislative mandates or contracting rules ending contracts without the possibility of an extension. So there are definitely mandates and those sorts of legalistic requirements that come out, but those are not necessarily in and of themselves business cases. In many cases, when you do have a legislative mandate, a business case might not be the most appropriate thing to address that particular mandate, especially if it's to end a contract. But in cases where there are actual alternative ways that you can potentially proceed, for example, with contracting, if you're looking at perhaps a special procurement. In addition to the normal contracting rules, there may be an opportunity to truly conduct an analysis there. But there are some cases where a business case may not make the most sense. For example, if you have a court order to take a certain type of action as a result of a lawsuit, you probably don't want to be doing a business case to talk about whether you want to comply with the court order or not. There are many opportunities, I think, for conversations about where a business case is or is not appropriate. I think in the last presentation I gave about business cases, we talked about that a little bit, but a business case is not always the one thing that you want to use. And if there is a requirement to have a business case for something that doesn't seem to fit into the business case process of identifying alternatives and evaluating them, that's a great opportunity to have a conversation with the folks who are looking to receive a business case, a formal business case usually, about what might satisfy the requirement to have some sort of written documentation or justification for a decision. And I see that Douglas has a hand up, so perhaps that is a follow-up to that question. I'd be happy to entertain that if you would like to come off mute.
Yeah, well, I think your explanation was for a specific type of use case. What I was referring to is that sometimes a legislative mandate is the core justification for a project. Therefore, it is part of a business case, not a business case that tries to prove that such a mandate is necessary. So it's a little bit flipped.
Yes, and in that case, I would say that the mandate is a part, yeah, to your point, your mandate is a part of the business case. It's not in and of itself the business case. So in most of those cases, there's going to be some sort of decision making that goes into how you go about meeting the mandate is my guess.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I've been running into issues where I've been trying to point out that this is part of the business justification, and I keep getting pushbacks like, yeah, but why haven't you improved the timings and stuff? It's like, it doesn't matter if the timings get worse. The mandate must be met. That is the core business justification for this effort.
Yes. And so let me go back just real quick here. So the business need or rationale, that's where I would say that kind of mandate fits, is in this description of what it is that's supporting the need to evaluate alternatives right now and consider a course of action. So it's many of these things here, pilots, white papers, those sorts of things. The point is that they are in and of themselves not business cases, though they may feed into business cases or be used in support of particular parts of the analysis or establishment of the problem.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. You just had hit upon policy and law and that sort of thing. So thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that. And anyone else that has questions, comments as we go, please let me know. And once we get through this sort of just level setting about business cases, we will get into the discussion part of this about the common issues that we find in business cases that I think a lot of you are going to have some thoughts and opinions to contribute. So let me go on to this piece. This is also from a previous presentation that I believe is recorded, but just to reiterate that there are the elements of a business case are alternatives, criteria, assumptions, constraints, problem statements, all of those sorts of things. But there is also this foundational layer of what is needed to be able to successfully complete a business case process. And that involves understanding of when a business case is needed, the roles and responsibilities across the organization, whether you're leadership, subject matter experts, or business analysts that are tasked with putting together the business case, how everyone's roles fit together. And then I think most critical and why it's the biggest down here is what a business case is. And again, it's in the framework that we're using here. A business case is a process to analyze alternatives to address a particular problem or solution. It's not just the completion of a written document that has a specific set of elements in it. So this could all result in a PowerPoint or I think a well-structured speech. But for the most part, most of us, when we're thinking about business cases, at least in a government context, we're thinking about a written formal business case that has these elements to it. And then from a project perspective, because I know that we also have a tie into the project management user group here, PMI has a business analysis component to it as well. And their definition of a business case is very project focused about supporting the establishment of a project and the chartering of a project. But it's still ultimately the same thing. It's about conducting and documenting an economic feasibility study that has several components to it. So again, it's not just the production of a document like the production of a project charter. It's the actual act of doing the study and then documenting that as well. So we have process elements in most of these definitions too, though we tend to focus on the specific written output in many cases. So this is all to say that in this framework, in this conversation, business cases are a process by which we do analysis to arrive at a decision to take a particular course of action. And that's what we're looking to best utilize as organizations making decisions on a regular basis, taking that process under consideration when we need to make those kinds of detailed and complex decisions that have the documentation behind them about how we arrived at the decision about what to do. So I think this is the fun part because as 44% of you said, you sometimes work on business cases. Another 23% of you have at least worked on one or are always working on business cases. So there's a lot of experience with business cases in this room. So I have plenty of experience with business cases as well. And it seems like there are several common themes to issues that folks have with trying to successfully complete a business case by going through that process to analyze alternatives. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about those and see if we can make use of the collective wisdom here to talk through some of the ways that we've gone about addressing these issues to try and get at successful business cases, even when confronted with some things that may derail the process we're trying to use. So I've got 5 that I've thought of myself as the things that I hear about and see most frequently, or that I've encountered in previous roles, providing oversight to folks who are trying to put together business cases that justify decisions. The first one is one of my favorites, different criteria. So this is where alternatives are analyzed, but we use different criteria depending on which alternative we're looking at. And my favorite example is that I did see a business case once where there was a very thorough cost analysis of one alternative and then a analysis of the available colors of a second alternative with no consideration of cost. So this option's in our price range, but that option's shiny. We don't know if the other option is in the price range or the other option is shiny. We just know those 2 facts about those 2 alternatives, and they may or may not have anything to do with each other. This most often happens when leaders haven't thought holistically about what is important to them and therefore have not conveyed that to the folks that are conducting the business analysis process. Or I've also seen this most often when an analysis relies on sales pitches. Sales pitches are really great about telling you all of the really fun and good things about a product or a solution. They're not usually going to highlight the things that are not so great about a product or a solution. So you end up getting different things highlighted based on who you're talking to about which product or solution that you're looking at. And that's not always just sales folks either. If you have really strong advocates for a particular course of action, they may advocate based on certain criteria or different things that they like about a particular thing that you could do to move forward and not highlight some of those other things that maybe would not be selling points. I think this one's probably the most obvious in terms of what the problem here is. If you're missing criteria, you might be missing things that are important when you're trying to make your final recommendation or decision. If cost is important and you're only receiving information about cost for one alternative, you may not know all of the information you need to know to sufficiently compare that to the other alternatives that are under consideration. So the biggest thing that you can do to address this is to establish criteria that at a minimum cover cost, benefit, risks, and the minimum requirements to address the problem or opportunity. You want to make sure that those are in and of themselves documented in the business case because you've made those decisions with your organization, and that those are then systematically considered across each of the alternatives that you are looking at as possible solutions to your problem. I'm curious if folks have seen this in previous business case processes that they've gone through, where there are some criteria that are really emphasized for some alternatives and not for others. Again, this is one that I see quite often when we're looking at things that are relying on specific opinions or viewpoints, typically from outside the organization. But if folks have any experience with that, please drop it in the chat, because this is something that is often a point of critique for business cases that I see in review. This one's fun also. This is where a business case may have all conclusion and no analysis. So this is the business case that tends to be really short, that says this solution or this alternative clearly meets all of our needs. It's obvious. Why do we need to get into the analysis of why it meets our needs? Just it's so obvious that we don't need to talk about it. This usually happens when we're relying on intuition or experience, or we're retroactively constructing a case to support a decision. So if we've already made the decision, oftentimes it's really difficult to think about why we made the decision. That's part of why it's so important to start the business case process as a business case process, so that you're going through and documenting the different parts of the decision making that happens to determine what the alternatives are and what the criteria are that you're going to use to analyze them. This is a problem because it prevents replicability and transparency. If you want to know why someone made a decision, saying that it's obvious is not going to help you get to the understanding of what went into that decision-making process. It also decreases your ability to understand when you might need to revisit your recommendations or decisions because something important changed, like one of your assumptions or part of the criteria that you're using, your understanding of how each alternative meets those criteria. If you haven't outlined those alternatives, if you haven't outlined those criteria or those assumptions, it's really difficult to understand when something would potentially change the decision that would be made there. Of course, if you're retroactively constructing a business case to support a decision, if the decision's already been made, then you may not have that problem. But in general, one of the purposes of going through a business case process is to make very clear why a decision is being made and to ensure that we're considering all of the possible alternatives. So this kind of use of conclusions in lieu of analysis prevents us from understanding how we got to the decision that we made. I have seen this in other areas as well, where there's a very strong preference for specific software platforms. In particular, I saw a business case several years ago where the decision to implement Salesforce was already made. And so the business case essentially said over and over and over again, Salesforce meets all our needs, therefore we're implementing Salesforce. Not a knock on Salesforce, but a bit of a knock on that alternatives analysis, because it didn't really take into account all of the different elements that might go into making that decision. The why was not clear. And this is one of the reasons why a way to address this is to ensure that we're using the 5 whys or other analysis techniques to understand what actually went into that decision or what's actually going into our understanding of how those alternatives may benefit us. Using that analysis every time you see a conclusion to replace that conclusion with some analytical component is a way to make sure that you're not relying on conclusions instead of the types of analysis that we're looking for. I'm curious if folks have seen this kind of business case as well. Let me know in the chat, or feel free to jump in if you've seen a business case or tried to construct a business case with this kind of input behind it. It's really difficult to get folks to think beyond the conclusion once they've already reached the conclusion. So this is a particular it's a particular interest to me to know how people take a look at this and resolve this when they come across it. This one is one that I call everything and the kitchen sink. So this is when you get the 300-page business case that has everything you could possibly think about or write about a particular problem or issue, and we throw it all in there and hope that some part of it is persuasive or meets the need. This usually happens when business cases are being constructed for purposes other than organizational decision making. So most folks who are trying to use a business case process to make a decision don't want to go through every single possible thing that we could think about a particular situation or set of alternatives. They have things that they want to consider or know about so they can make an informed decision. If we're trying to put everything out on paper just so that someone will be persuaded by something, that's when you tend to see all of the elements of a business case have as many possibilities as possible, and get into those, very long, not necessarily streamlined decision-making processes that don't really fit the need of a set of defined criteria that are going to be used to structure an alternatives analysis. It's a problem because the utility of the business case to generate informed decisions is lost, and this usually is a check the box exercise. Again, we're hoping that something in that 300 pages checks the box. It loses its structure, and it doesn't help inform the decision. It just ensures that something somewhere will likely justify the decision within that written documentation. The best way to address this that I've seen is to have the business analyst or other resources tasked with writing the business case focus on describing the problem to be solved and getting our leadership or the folks that we're working with as subject matter experts to really dig in on what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And then ask your decision makers what is most important to consider when solving it. That way you can focus on those particular things and not the broad world of possibilities that's out there. You can narrow in the way that a business case that is streamlined and ready to be used to help make decisions in the way that those do. And I'm curious for folks who are on the call, what the longest business case is that you've ever seen. The longest one I've seen is 302 pages is what it was. The final version of that business case was, I think, 75. So it started out as everything in the kitchen sink, and we worked on getting it down to something that was a more streamlined process. To be fair, it was a very complex decision, and it required a lot of complex alternatives analysis work, but 300 pages was the attempt at throwing everything in there and hoping that some part of it was persuasive so that we didn't need to work on the business case anymore, rather than using it as an actual decision-making process. All right, number 4, starting with the answer. So this is a set of people who are already well down the path. So this is the request that I know folks on this call have gotten to write a business case to justify the decision we just made. This is when the business case is viewed as documentation only, and the request comes in way too late in the process. So we're looking for documentation to support an already made decision, or the validity of a decision is questioned, and so someone asks for the business case that was used to make the decision, and we're retroactively putting it together. This is a problem because leadership does not have the opportunity to analytically consider alternatives before making a decision. Perhaps they did. Perhaps there was some sort of decision-making process that considered alternatives, but we don't know that it was analytical, and we don't know what criteria were used or how those alternatives were identified. That's one of the biggest benefits that you get from going through a business case process, is that systematic identification of the alternatives and the criteria that's used to evaluate them, so that you know what went into decision-making and why certain alternatives were considered or identified but not considered. At this point, it is really difficult to go back and retroactively create a business case, especially when we're already down the path with this particular decision. I generally try to suggest that folks look at a different type of justification, such as the white paper, and see if that would meet the need instead. I know that there are some processes that require a business case, particularly a formal written business case. And in that case, it's a I'll say fun, but a fun exercise to try and reconstruct the decision process after the fact. You do still want to go through and see if you can figure out what criteria were used and which alternatives were identified to construct a business case. But at that point, the utility of using the business case to make the decision is already gone because the decision has been made and we're justifying it retroactively. In future situations, something to do with this is to highlight that this is an opportunity to let leadership or subject matter experts know that starting a business case process to structure decision making really needs to happen well before the decision is actually made, so that we can prevent these kinds of situations where we're trying to retroactively justify decisions in the future. And then last but not least, and I think I've used this particular meme in every single presentation I've given, it's the go write a business case and let us know when you're done. There is still a perception out there that a business case is a research project that we can take a business analyst, put them in a room for 4 weeks, and they'll come out with a really great business case at the end. It's the issue with this is that I think for all of you who have written business cases or been part of business cases processes, as you know, this is not a situation where you can go and research all of the right answers to put into a business case. When you're talking about organizational decision making, you have an entire organization that is trying to make a decision, and that includes people with particular viewpoints, a whole bunch of organizational constraints that are going to be unique to your organization and not necessarily represented in the research and other similar organizations that you might look at. And you need those resources. You need leadership, you need subject matter expertise, you need other case studies and the ability to have facilitated conversations with folks to get at the parts of a business case that you cannot just go research to find. This is the classic misconstruing of what a business case is and what a business analyst can do without the access to the folks that they need to have access to. And I think this is the part that's going to dovetail into the next section of today, which is that the best way to address this is informing leadership that they too have a role in the business case, or to find an ally that can help make leadership aware that they need to play a role in the business case process and make others available to help as well. And then it's incumbent on the business analyst to make sure that they make good use of time available to facilitate parts of the process that are most important for each type of resource that you may have some access to. In a previous presentation, I talked a little bit about the role of leadership, subject matter experts, and business analysts in the process of a business case. You want to make sure that you're making the best use of your time with SMEs and leadership as you have it, especially if folks are not clear on what the purpose of a business case is. I would love to see just a quick emotion or emoji reaction of how many folks have been asked to go write a business case and let people know when they're done. Because this is a problem that I've encountered in many, many places. And I see a lot of thumbs up. So that's unfortunate, but also not super surprising that that's still kind of where we're at with a lot of folks understanding what a business case is and their role in business cases. So with this, I'm going to ask you all to respond to another poll. We just went through 5 issues pretty quickly. And I'm curious which of these you see most frequently in your work or that you've encountered most frequently in your work. For a second there, we were exactly 50-50 with starting with the answer and go write a business case. So, but it looks like starting with the answer is winning by quite a bit. All right, we ended up with about 70% saying starting with the answer. That's not super surprising. That's one of the things that happens when business cases are used kind of solely as after the fact justification. Is you already have an answer and you're looking for a way to justify it in writing to folks who want to understand how you made your decision best. Thank you for participating in that. That confirms the suspicion that I had that was still going to be a pretty prevalent practice. But my hope is that we can start making some progress with getting people to understand that business case processes are beneficial to decision making and not just a compliance exercise to do after we've made a decision. So I'm curious. I went through 5, and I appreciate the answers to the poll. But are there other business case issues that you've encountered, and how did you address them? What other kinds of things have you seen as you've gone through your careers working with business cases and as business analysts, and how did you go about either trying to make the best of a situation that wouldn't necessarily lend itself to a business case, or try to have others understand the business case process better? Any thoughts? Let's see. I see there's a message in the chat from Carolina about conflicting narrative about the solution in the same business case. So when the business case disagrees with itself, that's always fun to see that folks have gone through some sort of decision-making process and not quite gotten at not quite kept consistent with how we're understanding what the solutions or alternatives might be. Yeah, that's a difficult one. And it's really important that the business case stay consistent with the understanding of each alternative. And you've got to keep your stakeholders and leadership and subject matter experts on the same page about what the alternatives are, what they entail, and how we're assessing and understanding them. Yes, Ben added poor understanding of what the problem actually is. Problem statements are a huge issue because there are so many times where we are not clear about what problem we're solving, or we have folks in the same business case process trying to solve conflicting problems or different problems. It's really important as business analysts that we take the time to facilitate upfront a conversation or a set of conversations that get everyone on the same page about what the actual thing is that we're trying to do, the opportunity we're trying to take advantage of, or the problem that we're trying to solve. One of my previous presentations talks about problem statements and how to make sure that we're articulating what the problem is in a way that can actually lend itself to an alternatives analysis. There are many times that I've seen the problem is stated as a function of the desired solution, where, to use the Salesforce example, the problem is that we don't have Salesforce. So the only alternative that we're able to really consider then is implementing Salesforce. Again, not to pick on Salesforce, just a thing that I've literally seen. So really understanding what that problem is key to being able to understand what the potential alternatives are and what we think is important with trying to solve it. And certainly not possible when people are not on the same page about that. And I see another message about different business cases from the same organization taking divergent viewpoints on the same thing. Yes, especially if we're using business cases as decision-making processes, having an understanding of what the agency's viewpoint is or what the different parts of the agency might have as their viewpoints is important. And certainly doesn't lend itself to a better understanding of how an agency might approach a problem if we aren't consistent in how we understand things. Not to say that your understanding can't change, but if something's great here but terrible here at the same time, we need to understand what we're using to come to those kinds of conclusions. Great, thank you for the participation there. I appreciate it. There are many, many issues that folks encounter when they're trying to conduct business cases. So I know that you all have lots of experience addressing some of these issues. I do think that one of the big issues, though, is that we still have a gap between what leaders understand business cases to be and how we need them to participate in business case processes to make sure that we're getting what we intend to get out of business cases. So with this, I want to highlight a few things that we've talked about in other presentations, but also a potential new option that we may have as I work with some other folks within the state of Oregon to try and get at how we get leaders to understand business cases better. So making the case for business cases is difficult, in part because we have, I think, a lot of different thoughts about what business cases might be depending on where you're at and how much interaction with business case processes you've had. In general, I found that 3 approaches are helpful, and the third one I'm going to emphasize a little bit more and ask for some thoughts on. In general, changing the narrative around business cases and what they are and are not is critical to developing that initial understanding of what a business case process is. Showing how business cases fit into existing organizational decision-making structures is that second step that really helps with the cost-benefit analysis of what it would take to actually conduct business case processes as they should be conducted within an organization that already has decision-making structures. And then last but not least, especially when you're talking about leadership, enlisting the help of trusted resources and allies to support the understanding of business case processes and the importance of business case participation is a great way to help make sure that you're getting leaders talking to leaders to understand how this can be helpful to them. So changing the narrative is all about getting away from that idea that a business case is a document you write and changing that to a business case is a decision-making process that's facilitated. So we want to shift away from the idea that there is a template and you fill out the template in a room by yourself, and then that is your business case. And that we get to this idea of being around the table and understanding how we're going about making a decision together and documenting that process instead. And that starts with all of us because we're all in the business analysis world. Business analysts shouldn't be looked at as writing business case documents. They should be looked at as facilitating business case processes. You can still be responsible for putting together the document itself or filling out the template, but really you're there to facilitate a process and document how that process has progressed rather than writing a document in the way that you'd write a research paper. And in order to facilitate a process, you have to have some folks to facilitate and some processes to work with as part of that too. So business case processes really need to be a shared responsibility with leadership, subject matter experts, and impacted staff or customers, depending on the nature of the business case. You really want to make sure that those who are impacted and the subject matter experts that have the expertise in the particular areas you're looking at are able to contribute their knowledge and understanding to the business case process so that you can take their perspectives into consideration. And you want leadership to have the information from those folks when they're looking at different alternatives and understanding the implications of those alternatives as well. That all doesn't happen through going to the library and finding research, though that may help with some of the structure and framework that you use. You have to have that process by which you can have folks interact with the framework that you're establishing. And broader involvement makes better use of all organizational knowledge and resources. You never know where that pocket of information that's going to be critical to making the best decision you can make is going to live. And if you don't go through the process of engaging and facilitating a discussion about alternatives and how you go about evaluating them, you may miss really valuable understanding and knowledge elsewhere in the organization. So this is all about taking that narrative of send the business analyst off to write the business case and changing it to have the business analyst facilitate the business case process and having that be part of the discussion with leadership. The intention is to prepare them to shift their understanding of what a business case is and what it can bring to the organization. So there's that kind of definitional aspect of this, but there's also how business cases fit within existing decision-making structures as well. I don't know any organization that sets out to make bad decisions or decisions that are not the most advantageous to the organization. So trying to fit the business case process into the existing structures that we try to use to make good decisions is another way to in part how a business case can be helpful to leaders and the organization they're within. They can fit into structures pretty easily when folks understand what a business case is and where to use it. If we're looking to prevent snap decisions where due diligence is necessary, that's a place where we can look at a business case and say, let's go through a process to identify what the alternative approaches are to this problem and how we want to evaluate those. This is designed to prevent the shiny objects, the thing that you saw at the conference that you bought without thinking about it. It's designed to prevent that and focus instead on how to go about making systemic decisions. We're trying to get away from reliance solely on intuition and gut feeling. This is where, sometimes in emergency situations, you've got to make the snap decision. But in most cases, when you're looking at something, some large decision that's going to have a large impact without that sort of emergency component, you don't necessarily want to be relying on intuition and gut. You want to have that opportunity to have different viewpoints represented and to be able to think about all of the different ways you could look at the understanding of each alternative. Especially for public sector organizations, being transparent so that you're setting out how you went about your process and ensuring that it's repeatable by being detailed about how you arrived at your decision is something that folks strive to do. A business case is a great way to do that by engaging that process and working through it step by step and detailing in documentation how those steps progressed. That's a great way to ensure repeatability and transparency. And then last but not least, explaining to folks that the information gathered and created in business case processes can be used in other decision-making processes as well, is a great way to make the case that you're doing something that has other benefits to the organization besides just the decision that's being made today. So there are ways to kind of sell this, if you will, to make the case for how business case processes already fit into some of the desired attributes of decision making in most organizations, and to show that they can support some of the things that we strive for, especially in the public sector, with transparency and repeatability, focusing on that sort of quantification and analysis that is more desirable than just intuition and gut feeling. And then last but not least, ensuring that you have trusted allies and resources that may help articulate what a business case is, what it can do, and why it's important to have clear documented processes and decision-making structures in place. Peers and other organizations and agencies are a great place to start. If a particular agency did a great job of putting together a business case process to get to a particularly complex decision, linking those folks up with your leadership or leadership that you're working with can be a great way to make that sort of peer-to-peer connection. There are a lot of professional organizations that focus on sort of detailed analytical decision-making as well. Specifically, there are oh my goodness, words. The different kinds of professional organizations focused on different areas of different sectors of work. There are educational organizations for educational agencies, and we belong to the National Association of State Workforce Agencies as OED. We're always sharing information with other states and other organizations that have the same kinds of objectives that we do. Seeing what they've done in terms of decision making and how they go about sharing that also provides insight into the processes that they used and the structures that they put in place to support decision making in an ongoing way. Consultants and contracted experts are another group of resources that can help make the case for better decision making. Groups like Gartner and Infotech have lots of insight and experience coaching folks through complex decisions. There are other consultants that maybe have been hired by specific organizations that have trusted viewpoints and expertise on some of this decision-making structure that can be put in place to support complex decisions and alternatives analyses. Most of these folks, at least on the research and consulting side of things, also have templates and various frameworks and things that can help support different parts of a business case process as you go through it. I've seen matrices for criteria evaluation, things that structure conversation around problem identification, to Ben's point earlier, helping to understand what the problem actually is before you set out to solve it. Lots of different things like that that can be found in either those kinds of research consulting contracts or with consulting experts that you may have contracted with. And last but not least, your oversight and compliance organizations may have requirements for what a decision-making process needs to look like or be documented as. Looking to those for some guidance and some steps that may help facilitate a business case process can also be persuasive to leadership in an organization that is looking to improve its decision-making posture. So with the idea that perhaps an ongoing issue related to business case development and the use of business case processes in decision-making may be the role of leaders, and leaders needing to understand better what a business case is and how they fit into a business case process. I am interested to know what this group thinks would be beneficial for your leadership to know before you start your next business case process. And what could leadership do to address common business case issues that you're seeing as well? How do you see leaders fitting into this conversation about business case processes and what it is that we can do to make better decisions as organizations going forward? I'll just look at the chat real quick here. Hands, chats, anything that you would want your leadership to know, please feel free to add in. I see that Leanne has said that there's issue analysis write-ups essentially repurposed as quasi-business cases to get past having to do a business case to get moving on a specific action that's desired. Yes, the use of non-business case things as business cases, or the attempt to use things that are not that detailed alternatives analysis as a business case solely to satisfy the need to have a business case, is definitely something that I've seen as well. And it's, I think, comes from that misunderstanding of the benefit that a business case can bring to a decision-making structure. If we knew that there is benefit to having that kind of approach to decision-making that a business case brings, I think we'd see a lot less of the attempt to meet a requirement to have a business case with something that is not actually a business case. Are there any thoughts about what you would want someone to tell your leadership before you had to engage with them on a business case next time around? Yes, Leanne, go ahead.
Hello. I think I would just make the point, at least from my experience, of it's difficult to get there with your leadership unless they have a fundamental understanding and respect of the purpose of a business case and the purpose of the process. If it's a culture of impatience and closed door decision making amongst the leadership, and just a real impatience with much of any kind of documented project processes, right, to get you where you need to go, that's a huge struggle to try and overcome, which I'm not expecting an answer to solve that particular problem, but that to me seems to be, kind of a huge door stopper, right? Of there has to be somebody in the organization has to have some fundamental respect and understanding of the purpose of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think you're spot on with that. And developing that fundamental respect is difficult, especially when it's paired with that impatience. I think that the impatience is a big part of things too. where, if there is especially a history where a thorough business case process has resulted in the same outcome that someone's gut or intuition was saying should be the outcome, it becomes more difficult to then say, hey, let's stop things for a little while and go through this process just to confirm what our path forward should be, when the last time someone said, well, I could have made that decision right away and just, not gone through this whole process. Yeah. But
Thanks.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I see Carolina added in having the right people at the table to discuss whatever the thing is. Yes, I think that is also difficult to get folks to understand too, that again, there are subject matter experts, there are different components of a leadership team, and there are different groups of folks that are impacted by any particular decision that could all have really valuable input to provide to a business case process where we're looking at alternatives and providing their viewpoints. So getting the right people or the right representatives of different groups at the table to be participants in that process is really difficult, but also incredibly important and needs the support of leadership to make that happen. Mariah, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I think you just kind of got at what I was going to say, but I come from a background of public participation and community engagement, stakeholder engagement work. And I think that that's something that I wish our leadership could really understand is not that it's not just a document or a research project, it's a process, and that process involves people. And like, you have to be willing to put people's capacity, internal and external stakeholders who are, like you said, impacted by the decision, actually think about them as part of the process and involve them. And that takes time and intentionality. And it's not just like send us to the library and read a bunch of things and write up a paper to get to a really good, durable decision anyway.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It is an investment to make sure that process includes the folks that it needs to include. But I think also to that point, including folks in the process also then creates buy-in when you actually go through the implementation of whatever the recommended alternative is. So there is a longer term benefit. You may not see it initially, but having that kind of engagement also, brings people into the decision-making process and makes them more invested in the outcome of it too. So for our project management folks that are part of this conversation today, that's one way to get into some of that engagement work and all of that element of project management that comes out of the project that the business case ends up justifying. And yes, I see Douglas's comment as well, that, oftentimes if we're looking at decision making, I think that there's an element of bringing the folks in who are going to ultimately be looking at the documented output of a decision early in the process to understand what it is that we're looking for as far as a robust documented process goes for making a decision. It's hard to justify or to keep both sets of desires met when you have an internal decision-making process and external oversight to that. And in my experience, the purpose of the external oversight has been to try and make sure that the organizations are making the best decisions possible with the best process possible to get there. But it's hard to balance that when you also have a group of folks who are under a different type of pressure to make a decision in a timely way. But go ahead if you want to add something to your question or respond to that. I'd be happy to take that.
My whole point was that there's various cogs and players in this whole process, and whereas the decision was made meeting all the criteria that you said was good here, now that we're going back and moving the content into a document that at this point is essentially an auditing document. I mean, the business case was fully defined in the other deliverable. Now it's being modified, and so it's no longer an auditing document, it's a bit of fiction. So that is also a break point. It's good to rely on your consultants and your oversight folk, but that is also an area, it's not always the organization that messes up. Sometimes it's the systemic parameters around that as well. So that was my point.
I appreciate that. And I think, ultimately all of this documentation, especially with the amount of scrutiny that as public sector employees and in public sector organizations we're under, we don't want documents that have no basis in reality. I don't know anyone that wants a project management plan that has a bunch of fantastic plans that are not going to be, followed and are not the things that are actually how we're running a project. Same thing with decision making, right? Where we want to make sure that the documents reflect the actual process we're going through. And there are many conversations to be had when we start trying to, retroactively change things to get away from the decision making that was actually followed. That is a sticky situation. And that's part of why at the very beginning of this, I said, make sure that you consult with your senior IT portfolio managers and oversight analysts if you're working on a particular, oversight situation. But in general, I think everyone has the same objective, which is to make sure that our documents reflect what is actually happening or what has actually happened. And I think that's a common goal, I hope. So part of why we're discussing the role of leadership here is, and this has come up in several previous presentations, but I've also gotten some traction on this recently as well. There's a potential for, I'm going to say I don't know who we is exactly, although it may or may not involve me, but there's some traction around the idea of trying to get some sort of session, class is probably too much, but some sort of engagement with agency leadership around business cases and what the role of leaders are in supporting the business analysts who are facilitating those processes and the subject matter experts and other stakeholders that would be involved in those kinds of processes. So I'm curious, based on your experience working with leaders and the kinds of things that you would want them to know, do you think that would be beneficial based on what you've seen? How would you feel about potentially approaching leadership about taking a class training course, attending a session for leaders of organizations or agencies about business cases? All right, I'm seeing some responses come in. Looks like we have almost a little bit over 2/3 of you saying yes, you think this would be beneficial. That is great. All right, thank you for continuing to provide those responses. I think I've had some conversations with EIS. I've had some conversations with some of the other sort of leadership groups about, especially in preparation for the next biennial budget cycle, perhaps doing some sort of training or information session for agency leadership about business case processes and how they might be able to use those for all sorts of large decisions that are going to go into preparing for the 27-29 biennium. This is one of those places where if you have ideas about what would be beneficial from your perspective for agency leadership to hear to help you in these kinds of processes in the future, I want to hear them. Share them with your senior IT portfolio managers if you're in the IT world. Share them with this group, with Bang, if you have them as well. Again, I'm not entirely sure who the we is going to be in this, but there's some traction around this idea of not just talking to business analysts about how to conduct business case processes, but also talking to agency leadership and organizational leadership about business case processes too. Mariah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have some challenges. Our agency only got a PMO about 2.5 years ago, and we have quadrupled in size since before the pandemic. And so big learning curve around project management, business analysis, and all of that. And I think for me, it's the business case piece would be huge, but I think there's also kind of some learning for our leadership around what does effective and engaged project sponsorship look like, as well as like how to really define meaningful decision points, because so much of it is the decision's already been made, and or the decision point is aspirational in a way that a business case can't really solve. But in either of those situations, it puts a lot of people's capacity to work on something that ultimately that ultimately isn't used well, or at all. And so I think there's just a lot of missed opportunity there to understand how these tools and our practices could be used to better inform agency request budgets and decision processes and things of that nature, beyond just the individual concept of a business case.
Yes, thank you for that perspective. And I completely agree that, especially with business cases often being used as the starting point for projects, there's a natural combination there of project sponsorship with that sort of initial decision making that we're looking to structure with a business case process. So if we were to go through the development of a session for leadership, I think including project sponsorship and some of those early kind of project roles and responsibilities that sponsors have would be a natural part of that as well. I'm going to make a note of that. Tim Bang, for the record, I'm not volunteering to talk about project sponsorship because I think I've got the business case market covered. But that is also something that I've heard folks want to talk about, is what a for lack of a better word, what good project sponsorship looks like. And that seems like a thing that would benefit both business analysts and project managers.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I think you're preluding to a possible joint PMUG Bang forum in the future. So I'll connect with our PMUG counterparts and see if we can find a good speaker for that one and start getting that set up.
Fantastic. I love sessions like this where someone else goes away with an action item besides just me. So sorry, Tim, you're the recipient of the other action item here. Any other thoughts or ideas about things that would be helpful for your leadership to hear as we get into potentially talking about business cases and decision making with them? Things that stick out to you as something that you wish someone besides you would tell your leadership about these kinds of activities and processes. And if you think of them after the session, please, again, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat or take any ideas that you may have. We're looking to try and make something that is of use to you all as we get into potentially a busy business case season, preparing for the next budget cycle. And with that, that is what I had to share with you all today. I appreciate the time and opportunity to come back and chat with you all, and would love to open up for any last comments, questions, things people would like to share related to business cases. At this point, you all know I'm happy to talk about business cases ad nauseum, but if there are other things that people would like to chat about, I'm happy to take some time to do that. And otherwise, I can turn it back over to Tim, and we can potentially give you a little bit of time back in your day, which I'm sure we could all use.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Even though I've attended every single one of these business case sessions that you've given for Bang, and I think I even went through a business case training that you might have been a part of at some point in my career, I always learn something new in your business case forum, talks, trainings, sessions, whatever we call them. So thank you again very much, Rebecca, for coming back. And I'm sure we'll have you again next year for another one. So everybody can look forward to that. And if you have any questions that come to mind for Rebecca, you still have a couple minutes until we're totally done, that you could plop those in the chat or raise your hand or something. Before we let you go, our next Bang session is going to be October 16th. We're still working out some details for a topic and a speaker for that session. So we'll get those out to y'all, hopefully in the September newsletter, which you all know won't go out on time, but we'll try our best to get it out by the 15th. If you have a passion for newsletters, just contact us and we'd love your help. The next PMUG session is in about a month, and it's on organizational change management, another favorite topic of mine. And Carol Ann from DOJ is going to be giving that presentation with PMUG. Contact Amy Croucher to get set up for that one. Okay, thank you all for attending, and thank you again, Rebecca, for a great forum.
Thank you. We'll see you next year.
All right.